Welcome to episode 108 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about Canadian theatre makers featuring conversations with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. If you want to drop me a line, you can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. And if you want to find me, I am on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and you can find my website at philrickaby.com. My guest this week is playwright and actor Audrey Dwyer. Audrey's play, Calpurnia, produced by Nightwood and Soulong Theatre, runs January 14th to February 4th at Buddies and Bad Times Theatre in Toronto. Just one note, during our conversation, Audrey mentions police officers in schools, and recently, thanks to the efforts of Black Lives Matter, the Toronto District School Board decided to end that program. Here's our conversation. You studied at the National Theatre School?
Yes.
But before that, what was it like? When did you know that theatre was a thing for you?
Well, I was raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I went to the University of Manitoba for a couple of years, studied English literature and theatre, and I thought I wanted to be a journalist.
Okay.
And then I thought I'd much rather be inside the story than tell the same story that everybody else is telling.
So you were already studying theatre when you were at the University of Manitoba?
Yeah.
So had you been exposed to theatre much before that?
Yeah, I mean, I did some theatre in church. Like, I was in the school play, and I just did, like, a show here, a show there, did a Fringe show.
I was going to ask about Fringe, because, you know, in Winnipeg, you can't really, there's no way to avoid Fringe. It's such a central thing.
Yeah.
Did the fact that was such a major part of the community there sort of inform your theatrical direction?
Yeah, definitely. I did a few Fringe shows. Improv is also huge in Winnipeg, and so I did a lot of improv too. Okay. I did my first professional show at the Manitoba Theatre Centre. Okay. It was The Crucible, and that was an excellent and fun time playing one of the wild girls in that play. But it was after that I felt like I wanted to get more training, work on my voice, work on my physicality.
And so, did you hope to get that from the University of Manitoba, or was that something that you knew that you could get from the National Theatre?
Well, actually, I was being directed by Martha Henry in that production of The Crucible. And we were in the stairwell, sort of hanging out, and she said to me, "Have you thought about doing this professionally?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I'm going to go to Vancouver and try to be on the X-Files."
I love it.
Yeah. And she was like, "Oh, well, if you go to theater school, you will be able to develop your voice, you'll be able to develop your physicality so that you can have a long-term career and basically have longevity in the industry."
Yeah.
So I auditioned, and then I got in.
Nice. Was it the only place you auditioned?
It was the only place I auditioned.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
How was it there?
It was, huge.
Yeah.
You're constantly in class. You're constantly pushing yourself. I think the greatest lesson I learned there was awareness. Being aware of yourself and how to get what you need by being aware of what you need.
Was it difficult to change provinces?
A little bit.
Yeah.
It was such an interesting time, finding a place to stay. I didn't know how to speak French, and my mom came with me. and we looked for apartments together, which was, I think, a little nerve-wracking for us both. I wanted to be close to the school. I wanted to be close to the grocery store. You know, she was very worried about me being away from home for the first time. But we found a place that was, you know, a few minutes away from the school, so it was easy to get there and back.
Do you think it would have been easier to do that without your mother? Does having your mother help you find a place add an element of stress?
Well, you know what? How old was I? I was 19 when I had my, first time away from home. She definitely helped. I didn't find it too stressful with her. What was hilarious with both of my parents is that they helped me pack my suitcase. And when I got to my apartment and I opened it up, there were 17 rolls of toilet paper and 5 tubes of toothpaste. Yeah.
Gotta make sure you can get those.
Yes, yeah. They just wanted to make sure that I was okay.
Nice. Were you writing when you were there?
We had a playwriting class, but that wasn't my focus at all. Like, I was way more interested in being an actor.
Sure.
I think I might have written a monologue or two, but definitely wasn't really focused on that.
Sure. When did you start focusing on that?
I think a few years after I graduated in 2001, I started to feel like I needed to write parts for my friends. I needed to, like, just give my friends things to do that they wanted to do on stage and not to play stereotypes. So I started writing. I started at Nightwood Theatre's Right from the Hip program. And at that time, we just had to write like a 15-minute piece. And I wrote a piece about a young woman burning her house down. And it was what it was. But that's how I started. And then I started working at Second City in their touring company, and I took a bunch of improv courses and writing courses there because I wanted the challenge of comedy.
Sure.
And from there, I wrote another piece, and then Cayle Chernin.
Is there something that you were surprised to learn at Second City that you hadn't learned in any of your other?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I left with was the immediacy of comedy and always protecting the person with the lowest status. So if you're making a joke, it's not good enough to make fun of the person who has the least amount of power. At the end of the scene, they should have the most power.
Is that... And I'm thinking about, like, old comedy, where I don't think we always did that. Is that something relatively new for Second City, or do you think that's been something that's been there for a long time?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. Like, I don't know if they felt like it was a necessary thing for politics, or if it was about, we can't have an audience of X amount of people laughing at the person with the least amount of power.
Well, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Because I think that an audience today won't go with that.
Yes.
We will side with that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things about where we're at in the world right now. We've evolved, and that's what entertainment is supposed to do. That's what theater and film and all of these art forms are supposed to do. They're supposed to move us forward so that we're not laughing at jokes about, like, hitting your wives to silence them. Like, that's not funny anymore, right? But it was before, and people could relate, and that was a beautiful, wonderful thing, you know. But many years later, we know that that's not funny. So
and we have such a hard time looking at those things now. That we're like, our parents thought this was hilarious.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's really wonderful.
Yeah. So Calpurnia is about... Well, it's sort of about To Kill a Mockingbird. Right?
Yes.
It's about the maid?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about this play.
So Calpurnia is about a number of different things. It is inspired by To Kill a Mockingbird. And if you see it, you will be able to enjoy it even if you don't know anything about To Kill a Mockingbird. There's enough action within it that you'll be able to see it as like a fully realized play. Sure. But in it, Julie is trying to reclaim To Kill a Mockingbird by writing a screenplay from the focus of the Finch family maid, Calpurnia.
Okay. It's strange because as you're saying, if you don't know To Kill a Mockingbird, I'm thinking they're still teaching that in school, right?
Yes.
We all, if we went to public school, we read it, whether or not we used Cole's Notes or Cliff Notes or something like that to get through it. We all have some kind of connection with it.
Yes. If you haven't read the book, there's a huge chance you've seen the film.
What is it that drew you to Calpurnia?
The character?
Yeah.
Well, I was doing a play where I was playing a maid, and one of my co-actors remarked that the character I was playing was so strong because she was so silent. She was being berated racially, and she didn't speak up. And so he felt that I was really strong because I was silent. And I thought that was interesting because that wasn't necessarily a choice. The playwright wrote those lines. It was an interpretation, and I immediately became curious as to like why he felt that was a sign of strength.
Yeah.
Anyways, we spoke a lot about it, and he revealed that that stereotype is reinforced through literature, which made him believe that these women were silent, strong and silent.
Right.
These women, these maids.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't think that these women were so silent. And that's what inspired me to, one of the things that inspired me to like work on this piece.
It's true. I think that there's silence in, like we see it in the portrayal in movies. There's a lot of that silence. But I wonder, that's a white person's ideal of what the servant should be, is seen and not heard, and sometimes not even seen. So I wonder that if that's his experience with that role, then it's no wonder that he was like that strength.
Yeah, possibly. Like mammy culture and that specific stereotype is very intentional. I did a lot of research on mammy culture, and I discovered that one of the reasons why these maids are silent or asexual or almost without a personality is so that these classes that are engaging with either a play, a film, a novel, they can feel like they've done nothing wrong by having a maid. Usually those maids weren't paid well. A lot of them were assaulted. A lot of them had like terrible work experiences. They were not the wonderful family mothers that we have been taught to believe that they are. So it was a very enlightening time to understand what the function of that maid was. Yeah,
it's interesting because as we record this, we are heading into the Christmas season, and one of the popular movies at this time of year is It's a Wonderful Life, which I have mixed feelings about, because whenever we see the family at home when they're in the past, they have their maid that is taking a lot of shit from the younger son.
Yes.
And they're playing it off like, oh, she's into it, but she doesn't really have an option there except to play along.
Yes.
It's a really kind of uncomfortable scenes to watch in this quote-unquote beloved film. But it's clear that like that role, she's like, this is a white person's role. She's not going to speak up there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and these films and these novels they are beloved. Mm-hmm. They just evoke such warm feelings. Yeah. They are filled with nostalgia. They're intentionally nostalgic.
Yes.
In the film To Kill a Mockingbird, and some people say in the book, like, it's just got this beautiful mood of sadness to it. And as we listen to that, we can really be hearkened back to this time when people were racist and sexist, and we can really luxuriate in the fact that, like, we're not like that anymore.
Sure. The thing that I always found interesting when I read To Kill a Mockingbird is the racism is so casual. It's just there, and so it's really easy to just sort of like, from a white perspective, ignore it and think, it's this idyllic Southern, it's so calm and relaxed. And that's the easy way to see it when you have the advantage of having light skin. That casual racism has got to be different, coming at it from a different point of view.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think if you watch the movie now, which a few friends and I did, we were shocked. Mm-hmm. We were shocked by how painful the film is today, and how absolutely unbelievable. Atticus Finch is the good guy, John Ewell is the bad guy, and everything in between is kind of neutral.
Yeah.
And so, when John Ewell is killed, it's as if racism is over. And that's not the case. Like the city is absolved of its stain because the bad guy is gone. Mm-hmm. But the casual racism is vibrant and alive. Mm. It's one of those books that I feel like if we revisit it, we need to find a new way to relate to it. Mm. And that the way that we're approaching the dissection of it in school today, it needs to change.
I wonder, because it's been a long time since I was in school studying that book, and I do wonder how they're approaching it, and are they asking the difficult questions, or are we still just reading it for what it is? Don't ask questions about that because that's uncomfortable for us to talk about. Mm-hmm.
There are a few entries in that don't really change. So the N-word is one of them.
Right.
Why shouldn't we say the N-word? And equality. We're all equal. Those are the two major tenets of the book, according to educators.
Right.
I spoke to a friend of mine who said that he's been trying to, a white guy, has been trying to have the schools that he works at not teach that book. He tries to recommend other books. And he's found that over the 10 years, little by little, teachers are discovering that they can't look their black kids, their black students in the eye because they're actually not addressing the fullness of the book. It makes them uncomfortable.
Well, yeah. I mean, how can you read this book that doesn't, and not address it because it's not part of the curriculum, but also read this book that uses the N-word pretty liberally? It's the same as if we were studying Huck Finn, and just using the word in the context of a classroom ignores what that word means to the people of color that are hearing it.
And you've got one part of the book. Tom Robinson is escaping from the police, and he's shot at 17 times and dies. And so you read that today, and you've got young black men in the classroom, and if you're not dissecting that and looking at police violence, not just in the United States, but here in Toronto,
here too,
if you're not willing to dissect that, then how are you serving all of your students?
You're not.
If we don't look at Boo Radley, who for some is the first time they've read about a person with mental illness.
Yeah.
If you're not dissecting that, if you're not talking about mental illness, then you're missing a huge part of the book.
God, it sounds like we're still teaching the book in the same way we did 20 years ago, because you could do, from all of these themes, you could do an entire semester dissecting all of these things in a high school. But they're just like, just read the book, get to the next one.
And I mean, I think that we know that we're all equal already.
Yeah.
In fact, Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, we know that we're equal.
Yeah.
So how are you, like, we don't need that lesson. And I also think that a lot of white people know that we're equal.
Sure.
So if we can all agree that lesson has been learned, then what else is there? Like,
there are so many other things we could be taking from that book.
A part of the play that I really wanted to address was allyship, how we show up for each other.
Sure.
I think, kids, if they're simply learning that we're equal, when bad things happen, like racism or sexism or Islamophobia, when bad things happen, you go, oh, I would never do that. I'm good.
Yeah.
As opposed to going, oh, what can I do to help?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's one of the ways that we can look at this book.
Sure. I think that's definitely an important question to be looking at. You unpacked a lot about the book, and so for looking at The Maid and in your play, which is about somebody writing a screenplay, how does all of that come out?
Yes. Okay. Well, I put that all of the allyship, racism, sexism, classism. I put that in the action of the play, and so you've got a young woman who is named Julie. She's from a very wealthy class. She's Jamaican Canadian, and she's writing the screenplay. She's having trouble. She can't find Calpurnia's voice, and she needs to go deep and find it. Her brother, Mark, suggests that she's unable to because she's not Black enough, and they both have their own concept of Blackness. She's in a bind. That pisses her off. Yeah. That strikes a chord for her. And she proceeds to do the work. She proceeds to do some research on how to find that voice.
The concept of not Black enough is something that we heard in the States from some people during the Barack Obama years. It's something that I think I've heard thrown around occasionally. Is that is that something that people get told frequently, that they're not Black enough? Or
well, I think that the thing with being Black is it's something that people feel like they can comment on, that it's something that can be assessed.
Sure.
Your connection to your culture is so unique, it's so personal, it's so intimate that it's oddly accessible.
Yeah.
And I think it happens on many levels. It happens in the queer community. Yeah. If someone doesn't read you the way they expect to read you, then they can judge you based on what you're supposed to look like. Yeah.
Has Calpurnia been performed before?
No, I've had a couple of stage readings of it. One was Nightwood's New Groundswell Festival in 2014, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was a great time. The room was packed. We had to add more chairs. Calpurnia is a comedy, and people were laughing. People were standing up, looking around. It's one of those plays where you're laughing, but you're not sure you should be. and you're, you know, looking at your peers around you going like, oh, should I be laughing at this? This is hilarious. It's really great for that.
How long did it take you to write?
It took me about 3 years. I was a part of the Obsidian Writers Unit, and I was writing something that was just awful. And at the time, I was also in a play, and I, you know, spoke earlier about the conversation that I had. And I had asked a friend of mine what he wanted to see in the theater. And he was like, I want to see something that has to do with the past, but is a part of the present. And we brainstormed for a bit, and I was like, Gone with the Wind. And I was like, no, we can't do Gone in the Wind. Another theater company's doing Gone with the Wind. And I was like, Casablanca. I'm like, no. And then I remembered To Kill a Mockingbird. And I had read it and studied it in high school. So I thought, there's something there.
Did you find it, I mean, every play has its difficult moments. Did you find it difficult to write, or was it an easier play to write?
Well, the first draft flew out of me.
Yeah.
It was just, have you had that experience?
I have. And it doesn't always bode well for the second draft, but the first draft can really just sort of fly out, and then then we have to fix it and like make it good.
Yes,
you know?
yeah. The first draft I wrote in like 4 hours.
Yeah.
It was just magic. And then we had a reading at Obsidian, and people laughed, and people were very supportive. They were like, this is the piece. This is it. It's like, this is juicy. And then I got a grant, and I worked on character and plot, and I wrote 200 pages, and it was just too much.
Yeah.
And then I got another grant, and we like pared it all the way down. So it's such a process.
Yeah.
You know?
That play that you were writing that wasn't very good. And this is like one of those things that's fascinating. Anybody who writes has had that moment where like, this is the thing that I'm writing, and it's a train wreck or whatever it is. How did you figure out that it was... Because sometimes you can be blind to how bad something that you're working on is, and sometimes it just smacks you right in the face. Yeah. Was it apparent to you right out of the gate that this was not working, or was it?
Yeah. I wrote this play, and I think it was okay. Yeah. It wasn't exciting off the top, and so I thought, well, I'll just work on it and I'll find the excitement of it. But I was bored. It was about it was about a mom and her 2 daughters, and I just couldn't get the fire going. Yeah. I really wanted to write something that had people sit up in their seats, and as an actor, I know what it feels like to be in something that is just fiery, like when it's almost like no acting required. The words and the conflict are so hot that it's actually exhilarating.
Yeah. I've only had the pleasure of seeing a couple of things that have just like you sit down and it starts and you just sort of are immediately like forward on your seat. And everybody in the room knows it's good. Yeah. I've also seen things that are just sort of like that don't have the fire. They're just sort of like there. They're okay. Yeah. But they don't draw you in.
Yeah. I really wanted to write something that had people sitting at the edge of their seats going like, I cannot believe this. And as I was writing Cayle Chernin, there was a point where I felt nauseous. And I went, okay, I've got something. One of my theater mentors said to me that we want to see the character get into the mud. We want to watch them get out of the mud. And with that piece that I was writing that I didn't like, nobody was in the mud. Yeah. Everybody was just talking and the information and narration, but nobody was in trouble. And so I wrote a piece where like every character is in trouble.
I think that's something that we sometimes forget is how important it is for our characters to get into shit. We're so polite, and sometimes in Canada our theater is really polite. Yes, and we're so polite that we don't want these characters to get into too much trouble. Yep, but they kind of gotta. Yeah, they gotta just like you said, crawl into the mud. Yeah. Can I ask you what it was that was making you feel nauseous?
Well, Julie does something that's just terrible.
Oh, okay. I
can't tell you. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you.
No, it's that, like that.
Yeah.
No. And like, did you shy away from writing it, or did you know that you just had to stick with it?
No, I had to stick with it. I mean, this mentor of mine gave me that advice, but working in improv also taught me that.
Right.
That, like, live theater requires something messy and something instinctual, something visceral that you mean, the average person might never do, but the character is like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'll do it. The stakes are so high. The need is just so strong.
So, one of the things, you were kind enough to send me your bio, and a lot of people don't do that. I go into a lot of these things blind. And one of the first things in your bio is talking about your work in social justice and things like that. A lot of playwrights are just content to just, like, I'm just a playwright, and I don't have to deal with these things, but you put that front and center, which sort of like indicates how important it is to you. And so what draws you to that?
Well, it's very important for me to be doing whatever I can artistically to move the conversation forward and to promote action. And so in the pieces that I write, empathy is very important to me. But action is also very important to me. And so in the play, I display allyship and I display awful allyship. And I do that to show us, the audience, ourselves, I show what it is to be a frustrated young black woman. I show what it is to be a young black woman who's coming into their politics, and what it looks like when you mess up, and what we do with people who mess up. There's this sort of disposability culture that, if you mess up politically, if you say something wrong, someone's going to call you out, and then you're like excluded from community. I wanted to show audiences like what that looked like. Not everybody's going to be able to identify it as politically as some of my friends would. But all in all, I do feel like it's my way of contributing to what the world would look like if we all had the same amount of power.
It's interesting because thinking about, you're saying that maybe some people won't see like how political it is, or those things. In a way, in my mind, that's more effective than wielding a sledgehammer with a political message, because it gets under your skin if you don't know it. Whereas when you try to hit somebody over the head with your idea, they tend to get out of the way. So for the people who recognize the politics, that will be something they go yes, and for the other people who don't quite recognize it, it gets under the skin in an effective way.
Because I think, for a lot of these characters, they're just doing their thing. I have a character named Thompson who is an older white man. He's got a Jamaican wife. He has mixed race kids. He's deeply connected to his wife's Jamaican family. He travels to Jamaica. He has a full and varied experience of blackness, which gives him permission to comment on it. So he thinks.
Yes, of course.
And so, when you have people who are, given permission by a certain group or a certain group of people to engage, it's interesting to me that racism, like sexism, is one of those things where you think that you're not doing that thing because you're a good person or you have a background. But what we forget is everybody's an individual. And it's not enough to treat people the way you would want to be treated. You got to treat people the way they want to be treated. And that just means more work.
No, it's interesting because the idea of, because you have a relationship with black kids, black wife, whatever gives you the perspective. And a white guy would think that, right?
Yeah.
Totally. I grew up, my brother's adopted, he's black. So I grew up with, I think, early on, a bit of the same kind of idea when I was younger. It wasn't until much later that I realized how different our perspectives were. Because his movement in the world was different from my movement in the world. When I learned how often he was pulled over when he was just driving to work.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. And all the little things that he experienced that I had no idea about, because that's not how I see the world. It was shocking, but also an important lesson to learn, that even though we grew up together, our experiences are different because of the pigment of our flesh. And so,
Do you feel shocked still when he tells you these things?
Always.
Yeah.
Always. Because, again, I know it, but to hear it, like, and now he's got 3 kids, 2 of whom are boys, and young black boys go from being cute to being considered dangerous almost overnight, depending on their size and their age. And to watch that happen to his kids as well, I'm constantly shocked by that. And not because, part of it is I like to think that people are supposed to be better than that. And so I'm shocked by that. I'm shocked by the fact that it still happens, and it's almost 2018. But also, I'm thankful that he keeps reminding me, because I don't get to be complacent about it. It makes me question things that I do, which I think is important. And it's made me aware of my own white fragility, which some white people don't like to hear about. But it's made me very aware of it.
I mean, like, I think the common response is shock, right? And I think one of the reasons why we get shocked is because we have a very, like, skewed idea of, like, what the world is. And I'm saying this too as someone who consciously tries to feel like the world is like this wonderful place all the time. You don't want to leave your house. You wouldn't leave your house if you thought that every interaction was going to be horrible. My goal with Calpurnia is to show people what to do when you are shocked. Because it's the shockedness, if that's a word, it's the shockedness that makes us frozen when we could be doing something about it. You know? It's now more than ever, I think.
Well, I mean, I think you're right, because we've gone... do you remember that glorious age just after, maybe like less than 10 years ago, just after Barack Obama was elected president, and everybody was talking about how we live in a post-racial society? How quickly we have gone from, race doesn't matter anymore, to hearing about Nazis marching in the streets. And here as well. We like to think that it's a Canadian problem. It's an American problem. It doesn't happen here, but it is here.
I mean, it's here, and the scary thing is it's always actually been here. And that, post-racial... I know, like, one man becoming president of the United States doesn't really change the lived experience of so many African-American people. Nor does it change the experience of Black Canadians. It's a thing. But it's not the thing.
No, it's not the thing.
It is interesting, though, I think, how slow we in Canada are to recognizing that we have our own work to do. And I address that slightly in Calpurnia, because Julie is essentially writing about an African-American experience. her brother says that she should be writing about a Canadian experience. And she addresses colonization in her work. And it's just a brief moment where we get to see what her politic is as she is growing through her politics. She's like pushing through her values in order to grow. But in Canada, I feel like, we still feel like it's not the same.
Yeah, no, we do.
In many ways, it is the same.
One of the first times I was in New York, just a few years ago, this was like just after, I think it was Eric Garvey, and there was the massive march that really kind of launched the Black Lives Matters movement. Sort of like galvanized it into a thing. And it was a march that had been going on from like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And my girlfriend and I at the time, we encountered it at like 6 o'clock at night. And, we watched it. We stood in it. And as we were leaving, number one, we were able to leave, but also we left feeling so smug that this kind of thing doesn't happen in Canada. And it was later on that I started really, talking to my brother and his kids and things like that. And just that it does happen here. We're quieter about it in some ways, and in some cases we don't. It's not quite as dramatic, but it happens here, and we, white people, get to ignore it in a way that people of color don't.
Yeah, I mean, I had to take pause because you actually, like in New York, you were able to walk away from it.
Well, that's the thing, right?
Whereas I feel that a lot of African Americans did that march with the complete risk of their life.
Absolutely,
risking employment. It's such a huge risk to go on those marches. And I think here in Canada, we really, it's not in the news. It's not documented in the same way. It's here, and it's always been here. Stop and frisk. We've got carding. It's terrible. Not to mention the stuff that happens that has no name. There's nothing, I think, more frightening than how police in schools have been quite normalized. And I wonder about that, In the second part of the play, we get to see how Mark is, like, working on a case. He's a lawyer. And I touch on police violence slightly, but I think... having police in schools and the normalization of that is harrowing. And, it happens here. The kind of racial violence, it happens here. We're not exposed to it in the same way. And it's so easy, again, because of, I think, books like To Kill a Mockingbird that are... dated, nostalgic, that we as Canadians are left going, oh, well, not us. But in fact, us, big time us.
Oh, yeah. I heard, I was talking to somebody, and they had, their father had grown up in the States, and he was black, they were black. And her father said that he preferred racism in the States to racism in Canada. Because at least in racism in the States, you knew where it was. And in Canada, it was behind a hand or so polite that it was ugly. How subtle it was.
Yeah, it's those kind of microaggressions can really really chip at you. And it can leave you feeling quite displaced. It's unnameable. And it's insidious. I think a lot of racism is also couched in ignorance, is couched in I didn't know any better, and it's it's really, it's so harmful.
White people are so easy. We forgive it. My uncle didn't know any better. Oh, it's just Uncle Ted. He's from another time. You know, instead of like calling Uncle Ted out for being a racist. Things like that. We allow it.
Yeah. And there are countless things that people can do. I mean, they can Google it and find out what to do when their uncle's being racist. There are classes that you can take. You know, you can just say stop. You could start with stop and then see what happens next. It's just about moving from being shocked to action. It's also about understanding that in terms of allyship, that you're never off the hook as an ally. Like, you'd never get your ally gold star. It's always something that you've got to like hand in at the end of the day.
It's always a work in progress.
It's always a work in progress. And you know, as soon as you're patting yourself on the back for a job well done, then you know you've done something wrong.
No, you get to, if you had a silver star, you get to give that back.
Yeah, I can give that back. In my writing, I've written a role for a Filipina actress. Julie's maid is Filipino, and so I have Filipino relatives and Filipino friends, and I knew that from my experience as a Black person who's played tons of different roles, I knew that as a writer, I needed to honor the people that I was writing. And so for me, it was really important to have theater people read it and give me extensive notes, and to have non-theater people read it and also give me extensive notes, and that in the rehearsal process to be working like alongside our actress who will be playing Pressy to make sure that I'm always on point. Because anytime I feel like as a Black woman I've got it, then I know then that I don't. So it's as an ally, it's very important to check yourself and to be always willing to listen and self-reflect and apologize and do the work.
Yeah, and I think some of us are really bad at apologizing when we get it wrong. Yeah,
defensiveness is
defensiveness, it doesn't help.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sorry I got it wrong. I'll do better. You know, and so I didn't know.
Yeah, you know. Yeah. It's interesting, like, looking at To Kill a Mockingbird now, and, you know, the character of Scout, such an innocent, also an icon, a huge icon for the queer community. And, you know, Atticus teaches her about racism, the mob of angry men who want to lynch Tom Robinson, you know, meet him at the courthouse and XYZ. Anyways, he tells Scout that this lynch mob has a blind spot, that their passion for killing this Black man who's innocent is a blind spot. And that's always stood out to me, because that kind of hatred, that kind of action is not a blind spot. It's a choice. Yeah. And so, you know, when you look at the book and you go, okay, this is how we're teaching our young people about racism. This is how we're letting them kind of sit back in a passivity that only makes things worse. Yeah. You know, if we're on the bus and we're seeing something that is racist or sexist, it's our duty. Like, we can't sit here as Canadians and say we live in the best country in the world, and when we see things where we're like, well, I can't believe that happened, or, oh, that's not me. We have to we have to speak up. And so that's one of the reasons why I feel like there are other ways to examine the book, which is one of the reasons why I wrote the play.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we need. As you talk about it, I think how are we still? Like, how has the curriculum in schools not evolved? That we're still reading these same books in the same way. We need there are other books that we could be reading.
Yeah, I mean, some of the teachers love the book, and it's so easy for them to talk about a book that they know that they have an emotional connection to. Yeah. I think it's very expensive to buy new books.
Yeah. Also, curriculum is it's calcified and solidified by people who are not the teachers now.
Yes.
And they don't have the freedom that they used to have.
Yeah.
I feel like when I was in school, the teacher might be like, all right, we're reading this book. They have a list of books that we can read. Everybody does these ones. Here, we're going to read this one.
Yes.
And now it's like, these are the books you're going to read.
Yeah.
But again, I kind of wish that we'd examine them in a more deep way. Yeah. How did this play? You said you're in rehearsal.
We start rehearsal on December 18th.
Okay, so that's coming up. And
yes.
The show opens near the beginning of January.
Yeah, right? We open on January 17th.
Yeah. So, this is gotta be pretty exciting.
I'm really excited. I'm really, as director, I'm absolutely thrilled and thankful that it's being produced by Nightwood Theatre and Soolong Theatre. So I can't wait. Nice. Yeah, everything's moving right along.
Gotta be coming up like a locomotive at this point.
Yes. Yeah. We're having tons of meetings and everything. It's really great.
Yeah. Are you on social media?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Facebook. I don't tweet.
Do you Insta?
I am on Instagram. But my Instagram is private.
Okay, that's fair. Do you have a website?
No, but I should get one. Everybody's telling me I should get one.
It really helps when people want to Google you. It's it just comes up.
Yeah, if you Google me, you'll just get a bunch of headshots and old plays that I've done.
There's a lot of information about Calpurnia if you Google you right now.
Yes, that too. Calpurnia, that too.
Yeah. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having this conversation.
Thank you, Phil.